Hello friend, thanks for joining me for another book chat. Today let's spend some time with Boiled Wonderland and the End of the World by Haruki Murakami. This book was originally published back in 1985 in Japan, and I read an English translation by Alfred Birnbaum. So Boiled Wonderland and the End of the World by Haruki Murakami. I wanted to read this again. This is the ninth of the Murakami novels that I've chatted here on my channel, so I will link to the playlist of the other chats down in the details down below. But I wanted to reread this again. This was my third read for this book because, for one, it's my favorite of the Murakami novels that I've read so far. I just enjoy this so much. And, I had never chatted it, so I wanted to reread it again in order to give a proper chat to it here on my channel. So, what is this about? Hard-Boiled Wonderland is one reality in this book, and the end of the world is another reality. So the odd chapters of the book take place in the hard-boiled Wonderland, and the even chapters take place at the end of the world. So these two different realities, though, there is a connection between the two, which we gradually come to understand through the course of the novel. And I'm not going to give that away, or in fact give away anything that I think would detract from a first-time reader's experience with this book. So I will be careful about that. So how to approach this somewhat, unusual story? I think, how I'll do it is to, just to describe sort of the main characters of each of the different realities, the Hard-Boiled Wonderland and also the End of the World. In the Hard-Boiled Wonderland, well, first of all, none of the characters in the book actually have names, so everybody is unnamed. They sort of are known by either nicknames or their occupation in some cases. So in the Hard-Boiled Wonderland, the main character is the narrator, and he is a calcutech. So the Hard-Boiled Wonderland is kind of a cyberpunky sort of science fiction world. It's not the world that we inhabit every day here in, the reality I'm in currently. It's a different world. The government's this quasi-governmental organization called the System, and this calcutech the narrator is a calcutech, and he's basically a human computer. He's a human data processor who processes data in this sort of organic way. He has been altered to be able to do this, and he's called for this mysterious job by the professor. The professor is this man who has this research lab in the sewers of Tokyo, and it is in a domain that's inhabited by these very dangerous beings called Inklings. But the professor has figured out a way to sort of hide from the Inklings, and he's experimenting with sound removal. So as the novel opens, we meet his granddaughter, sometimes she's known as the granddaughter, and sometimes she's known as the chubby girl or the chubby granddaughter, and she's silent. And the reason why she's silent at the beginning of the book is because she's been sound removed by her grandfather, by the professor. But the Inklings are very dangerous, like I mentioned. They actually eat humans. They don't just eat them fresh, though. Once they capture a human, they let them die and soak them and let their flesh become putrid before they eat them. So they're very sort of gross beings. But the professor's hiding this research from the factory, which is another sort of system. The semiotics are these people who work for the factory, and so they're actually trying to capture to steal the professor's research. So the narrator, the professor, the chubby granddaughter, then there's the long-haired librarian. There's a librarian that we meet. The librarian, so the calcutech, the narrator, eventually, he's drawn into this sort of mystery with the professor. The professor eventually goes missing, and the professor gives him this unicorn skull. and he tries to do research, and in the course of his different research where he's trying to figure out what's going on, he meets this librarian. Now this librarian, the librarian's a very interesting sort of character too. She's basically she eats tons and tons of food. She's not chubby like the chubby granddaughter, but she nevertheless can like put away many courses of food and not skip a beat with it. So yeah, the long-haired librarian. Then we have Junior and Big Boy. Junior and Big Boy are these thugs that are really after the narrator eventually, and so there's some danger there. He runs across them in a couple of instances that are pretty grim. I've kind of already talked about the Inkling, so that's another sort of dynamic going on in the Hard-Boiled Wonderland. So we do have this mystery in the Hard-Boiled Wonderland of what's going on. What does Big Boy and Junior want with the professor's research? What is the professor's research? And then when he disappears, where is he? So there's all that going on in the Hard-Boiled Wonderland. And then in the end of the world, so the end of the world, again, we have an unnamed narrator who shows up in this village, at a gate of a village, and he has to leave behind his shadow at the gate of the village. The gatekeeper is sort of the person who runs that village as far as letting people in and out and enforcing the rules of the village, and the gatekeeper forces the narrator, once he is entering the village, to give up his shadow, and the shadow then becomes imprisoned there at the gate. The narrator is allowed to visit the shadow periodically. The shadow is wants to plot a way to reunite with the narrator and escape the village. But the thing is, being separated from the narrator, the shadow starts to weaken over time. But the narrator is given a job at the end of the world, and that is as the dream reader. So he has to show up at the library. So we have another librarian at the end of the world. She doesn't eat all the time like the librarian in the Hard-Boiled Wonderland, but she actually is the one who is the caretaker of the library, which is basically a library of unicorn skulls. And the narrator is able to take these skulls and he's able to read the dreams of these deceased unicorns. Now, in the village, there are living unicorns. They go outside the gates every night, and then they come back in. I think that's how it works during the day. In the winter, though, as the winter approaches and the winter comes on in the book, many of them die because of the cold in the winter. But this is sort of explained to the narrator as sort of, just the cycle that they go through. But they leave behind then their skulls, which contain their dreams, and it is the narrator's task to read the dreams. He doesn't know why that's his task or even what's going on with that. So the reader is also trying to figure this out. What is going on in this village? What is the meaning of the dream reader and the unicorn skulls? Is he going to be able to reunite with his shadow and escape the village, or is he going to be there always? The people who are in the village have also had to give up their shadows. There is this mysterious woods in the village that people dread going into. The woods are considered dangerous. And then there's a caretaker that we meet eventually. He lives on the edge of the woods. And so he's not allowed to come actually in the village, but he's not quite in the woods either. And the book does eventually explain that. So that was pretty cool. And then finally, the Colonel is another character in the end of the world. This is the friend of the narrator who nurses him back to health when he gets sick, and provides a lot of the information about the village to the narrator. So those are the characters and sort of what's going on in both of the realities of the book. I just want to touch base on a few kind of quotes that I thought were really cool from the book before I run out of time. One is about the chubby granddaughter. So the chubby granddaughter, she hasn't been to school, but yet she's very world-wise, even though she's only 17 in the book. So the narrator says to her, "So you didn't go to school after you were 6 years old?" "That's right. But what difference does that make? I mean, I could do all sorts of things. I can speak 4 foreign languages. I can play piano and alto sax. I can assemble a wireless. I studied navigation and tightrope walking. I've read tons of books, and my sandwiches were good, weren't they? Very good, I admitted. Grandfather always said, school's a place where they take 16 years to wear down your brain. To me, that passage was so Murakami. These random things she's mentioning that she's able to do, like tightrope walking and making a good sandwich. This is what her education is. But she's nevertheless very sharp and very world-wise, especially to the ways of the Inklings, the system, and the factory that are in the hard-boiled Wonderland. Then there's another quote here. It's about consciousness, because this book ultimately is about consciousness. We have the consciousness, as it's explained, sort of the rational consciousness of the hard-boiled Wonderland, and the subconscious, the dream consciousness of the end of the world. And so that's a running theme throughout the entire book. But this quote says, "It's not so strange that your memories change, that when your memories change, the world changes." Pretty academic, if you ask me, I said. Too conceptual. You're disregarding the time factor. You're reversing the order of things. No, the time paradox here's in your mind, he said, the professor. As you create memories, you're creating a parallel world. So yeah, you get the rational world and you got this dream world, 2 different worlds going on and illustrated in the hard-boiled Wonderland and at the end of the world. And then finally, the quote that I thought was really cool was, there's evolution that takes millions of years, and there's evolution that only takes 3 hours. This quote is coming from a conversation that the narrator's having with the long-haired librarian in the hard-boiled Wonderland. And he's like, I need to figure out this. I need all the research on unicorns. I'm trying to do, this is urgency. And she says, what's so urgent? And he says, it's a matter of evolution. And she's like, evolution? Doesn't that take like millions of years? And he says, well, there's evolution that takes millions of years, and there's evolution that only takes 3 hours. So true. I thought that was so cool. I think I will leave the chat there. I love this book. As I mentioned, it's my favorite of the Murakami novels, I think, because I love this parallel, especially the dream world at the end of the world, and then making sense of it all sort of as time goes on. It's not necessarily an easy book to figure out as you're going along with it, but I think if you just let it unfold before you, you can figure out what the connection is between the hard-boiled Wonderland and the end of the world by the time you get to the end of the book. So I'll leave the chat there with that. I will have some more Murakami coming up. I do have another Murakami book planned for this year. I have been meaning to get to Sputnik Sweetheart, so that's on my reading plan yet for this year to come. But my next chat is going to be Memoirs of Hadrian, some historical fiction by Marguerite Yourcenar. So this chat will be coming up soon. So until next time, take care.